on the oil price graph for 4 countries, Iran, Nigeria, Russia, and Venezuela. What does that look like? Well, the freedom index for these petrolist states, states highly dependent on oil for their GDP, looks like this. Oh, well, that's interesting. See, the price of oil looks like that, and the freedom index looks like that. What does that tell you? It tells you that the price of oil and the pace of freedom operate in an inverse correlation. As the price of oil went down from 1979, the pace of freedom went up in these countries. And as the price of oil went up, the pace of freedom went down. Now, of course, you know this anecdotally. When oil was $30 a barrel, President Bush looked into Vladimir Putin's soul and saw a good man down there. You look into Putin's soul at $70, you'll see Gazprom, Lukos, Izvestia, Pravda, every institution and newspaper he has swallowed with $70 a barrel oil. When oil was $30 a barrel, Iran elected Khatami as president, who called for a dialogue of civilizations. When oil was $70 a barrel, they elected Ahmadinejad, who said Israel should be wiped off the map, and the Holocaust was a myth. One thing I can promise you folks, at $20 a barrel, the Holocaust will not be a myth. That's nonsense you can only afford at $70 a barrel, okay? Which was the first Arab Gulf country to discover oil? Bahrain, tiny island state off the east coast of Saudi Arabia. Which was the first Arab Gulf country to run out of oil? Bahrain. Which was the first Arab Gulf country to hold a free and fair election where women could run and vote? Bahrain. Which was the first Arab Gulf country to sign a free trade agreement with the United States? Bahrain. Which was the first Arab Gulf country to hire McKinsey to come in and revamp their labor laws because their people were going to have to work? Say it with me now. Bahrain, okay? Oh, that's not an accident. That's the price of oil and the pace of freedom operating in an inverse correlation. You want to know what plan B is for Iraq? Bring down the price of oil. The motto of our revolution was no taxation without representation. The motto of the petrolist dictator is no representation without taxation. Hey, pal, if I don't have to tax you, I don't have to represent you. So green is actually the most geostrategic thing we could be doing now, I believe, to promote the reform agenda in the Middle East, and by the way, to deal with Iran. I was in Moscow a few months ago, gave part of this talk at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow to a group of academics, made the point that it was $10 barrel oil that brought down the Soviet Union. Afterwards, I went up to Vladimir Mao, one of their leading economists. I said, Vladimir, I'm right, wasn't I? $10 a barrel brought down the Soviet Union. He said, no, Tom, you're wrong. It was $80 a barrel oil, followed by $10 a barrel oil, that brought down the Soviet Union. And I promise you, friends, I promise you that $20 barrel oil following $80 barrel oil will bring down the Iranian mullahs, or it will transform Iran. Okay. So anyone who thinks, two just short numbers. Iran in 2005 earned $44 from oil exports, which were 80% of government receipts. The rest were carpets and pistachios, all right? Iran in 2005 spent $25 billion on subsidies of food, housing, education, cheap gasoline, which they're now paying for. What does that mean? That means if you brought the price of oil down back to around $40 a barrel, Iran's entire budget would go to subsidies. There's an economic term for that, unsustainable. It is unsustainable. So green is hugely geostrategic. In fact, I would argue it's the most geostrategic thing we could do today. Second reason green has gone Main Street, and I'm not going to dwell on this because John Doors, I think, talked about it so excellently beforehand, is the whole climate issue, Katrina, whatnot. We all know I believe we all know the climate is changing. And green obviously is the answer for that clean, non-emitting power. Third reason green's gone Main Street, though, has to do with what I call the flattening of the world. Because what the flattening of the world has done is brought 3 billion new consumers onto the global economic playing field, all with their own version of the American dream: a house, a car, a toaster, a microwave, and a refrigerator. If we don't find a cleaner, greener way to power their dreams, we are going to burn up, choke up, heat up, and smoke up this planet so much faster than anyone realizes when it's flat, as opposed to when it was round. The world has never seen 3 billion people, and God bless them, move from low-impact energy and environmental lifestyles to high-impact energy environmental lifestyles in this short period of time. So the flattening of the world makes green hugely important, both economically and obviously in terms of climate. The flattening of the world also is stimulating a huge competition. Competition in the retail space between Walmart and Costco and Tosco and Kmart and Target. And that competition, that intense competition over every penny, is making companies like Walmart discover green as a whole new competitive edge. They're discovering that dirty is waste, and waste means higher prices, and higher prices in a flat world means you get creamed economically. So the flattening of the world is actually driving green in that way as well. The most important way the flattening of the world is driving green, though, is, I believe, this is the foundation of the next great industrial revolution. Green, clean power. For one very simple reason. You cannot make a product greener without making it smarter. You cannot make a toaster, a microwave, a car greener without making it smarter. What do we still manufacture in this country? We manufacture things that are smart, that have a lot of knowledge embedded in them. What do they make in China and India? Well, they're now focused on making things that are cheaper. What does that mean? That means to the extent that we shift the whole global debate to green, to making green part of the DNA of every product, we shift the whole global economy toward jobs that are much more difficult to outsource. We shift it from dumb jobs to knowledge jobs. Now, the best example I can give you of this is Erie, Pennsylvania. Erie, Pennsylvania, in the heart of the American Rust Belt, today has a trade surplus with China and Mexico. Well, how could that be? Erie, Pennsylvania? Are you sure, Tom? Yes, I'm sure. It's all because of one company, GE Transportation, which has 4,500 employees in Erie, Pennsylvania. And what does GE Transportation make with its 4,500 engineers who make almost twice the average wages in Erie? GE Transportation makes choo-choo trains. It makes locomotives, okay? And it sells locomotives to a locomotive train country called China. Why? Because on a total ton-pulled basis, GE's locomotives are so smart and so energy efficient, even though China sells its locomotives for 30% less, it's more efficient for China to import locomotives from GE Transportation. You can't make a product greener without making it smarter. So when I hear people say, we can't afford to be green, that's utter lunacy. We can't afford not to be green, because the next great pool of manufacturing jobs are going to be green, smart jobs. Mom, Dad, tell your kids, anything green is going to have a good upper middle class job associated with it. So those are the main reasons, I would argue, that green has gone Main Street. People see all that. But Why hasn't it gone down Main Street? And it really hasn't. We haven't made any real inroads on this huge scale project. Well, the reason it hasn't gone down Main Street is really very simple. And yes, I do like to simplify things. Especially when people make them more complicated than they need to be. And the reason green hasn't gone down Main Street is because to get down Main Street, how do you have a revolution at scale? You take capital and you connect it to new technology. Capital and new technology. That's what the IT revolution was all about. It was capital with new technology. But the green revolution is different from the IT revolution. Because the green revolution needs government policy in the middle to connect capital and technology at scale. And where the huge roadblock is. People say we need to drill for oil in Detroit. No, no, no. We need to drill for oil in Washington, D.C. All right? Because the biggest impediment to a real green revolution today is the Congress, both parties, okay? And Washington, D.C., starting with the White House. We are not connecting, that's okay, it's not crossfire, it's late. We are not connecting capital with technology at scale, and this is a scale game. People write me all the time, come see my hot air balloon, it turns a wheel, it milks a cow, it produces clean methane. I love you, okay? But it's not gonna happen at scale without that thing called policy in between. Why is that? Has to do with the very unique nature of the project we're engaged in. And again, Nate Lewis taught me this. Let's say I invented the first cell phone. A phone you could carry in your pocket. I came to my friend David Bradley. I said, David, I have a phone you can carry in your pocket. He says, Tom, I'll take 10. That phone, a phone I could carry in my pocket, that would change my life. I'll take 10. I say, David, they're going to cost $1,000 each. He says, no problem. That would change my life. I sell 10 to David, 10 to John, 10 to Walter, 10 to all the folks up here. I take all that money. I come back 6 months later. I say, David, remember that cell phone? Now I got one. Only costs $900. Smaller, better range. I moved down the innovation curve. Now I'm on a roll. A couple years later, I come back to my friend David. I say, David, remember that cell phone I sold you? I got something else now. See that light up there? I'm going to power that light with solar power. David says to me, Tom, that cell phone you sold me, that changed my life. You may have not noticed, I already have light. I really don't care where the electrons come from. That's the problem here, folks. As Nate says, people say this is a moonshot. The energy revolution's like a moonshot. Yeah, it's like a moonshot when Southwest Airlines already flies to the moon and gives away free peanuts. David Bradley already has cheap light. So unless the government, the policy thing in between capital and technology comes along and says, David, from now on you are going to have to pay $110 a month for that light because you're going to pay for the CO2 it's emitting in the atmosphere. Then when I come along and say, David, I've got a solar light for 100, he says, I'll take 10. And I sell 10 to him and 10 to Walter and 10 to John, and I take all that money. I come back 6 months later with a solar light for $90. That's how you get scale at the China price. And what's not happening today, folks, is that policy change in the middle. Did you follow the energy debate in the Senate 2 weeks ago? Well, they finally twisted enough arms that we will now finally, after 32 years, have new CAFE mileage standards Are you ready? Have you fasted?